Clara Bow was one of the biggest movie stars of the 1920s, a woman who received more than 45,000 fan letters in a single month and whose presence in a film practically guaranteed box office success. She was the original It Girl, a term that still gets used today, and she embodied everything wild and free about the jazz age. But behind the flapper image and the infectious energy that lit up the screen was a woman who survived a childhood so traumatic it would haunt her for the rest of her life, and whose meteoric rise to fame would ultimately lead to a devastating fall that left her broken and forgotten by the industry she helped build. Clara Gordon Bow was born on July 29, 1905, in a bleak, sparsely furnished room above a dilapidated Baptist church in the Prospect Heights section of Brooklyn, New York. Her birth itself was a fight for survival. She was her parents' third child, but her two older sisters had both died in infancy. A doctor had warned Clara's mother, Sarah, not to get pregnant again, fearing the next baby might die as well. But Sarah became pregnant anyway in late 1904. To make matters worse, a brutal heat wave hit New York in July 1905, with temperatures reaching around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Years later, Clara would write that she didn't suppose two people ever looked death in the face more clearly than her mother and herself the morning she was born. They were both given up, but somehow they struggled back to life. That struggle would define Clara's entire childhood. Her father, Robert Walter Bow, had what Clara described as a quick, keen mind and all the natural qualifications to make something of himself, but everything seemed to go wrong for him. By the time Clara was 4 1/2, he was out of work. Between 1905 and 1923, the family lived at 14 different addresses, always in or around Prospect Heights, with Clara's father often absent. Clara would later say that she didn't think her mother ever loved her father, and that he knew it, which made him very unhappy because he worshipped her always. But it was Sarah's condition that cast the darkest shadow over Clara's childhood. When Sarah was 16, she had fallen from a second-story window and suffered a severe head injury. She was later diagnosed with psychosis due to epilepsy. From her earliest years, Clara learned how to care for her mother during seizures and how to deal with her psychotic and hostile episodes. Clara said her mother could be mean to her, and often was, but that she didn't mean to be and couldn't help it. Still, Clara felt robbed of her childhood. As a kid, she said, I took care of my mother. She didn't take care of me. The poverty was crushing. Clara spoke about lying in bed with her mother, both of them cold and hungry for days. She never had any clothes, she said, and lots of times didn't have anything to eat. They just lived. That's about all. At school, girls shunned her because she was so poorly dressed and had carrot-top hair. From first grade, Clara preferred the company of boys. She could lick any boy her size, she boasted. Her right arm was quite famous from pitching so much. But tragedy struck even there. A close friend, a younger boy who lived in her building, burned to death. Clara heard his screams and ran to his aid, rolling him up in carpet to stop the fire, but he died in her arms. The memory would haunt her forever. In 1919, Clara enrolled in Bay Ridge High School for Girls. She wore sweaters and old skirts and didn't want to be treated like a girl, but her mother had a spell of good health and changed Clara's appearance, cutting her hair more femininely. There was one boy who had always been her pal, Clara remembered. He kissed her. She wasn't sore or indignant, but she was horrified and hurt. She knew she could never go back to being a tomboy. Clara's interest in sports and her physical abilities led her to plan for a career as an athletics instructor. She won 5 medals at the Cinder Tracks and credited her cousin Homer Baker, the national half-mile champion in 1913 and 1914, for being her trainer. But Clara found something else that spoke to her even more deeply than sports: the movies. In the early 1920s, roughly 50 million Americans, half the population at that time, attended the movies every week. As Clara grew into womanhood, her life became increasingly impossible. She had no girlfriends. School was a heartache. Home was miserable. But on the silver screen, she found consolation. For the first time in my life, she said, I knew there was beauty in the world. For the first time, I saw distant lands, serene, lovely homes, romance, nobility, glamour. And she felt something else too. I always had a queer feeling about actors and actresses on the screen, she said. I knew I would have done it differently. I couldn't analyze it, but I could always feel it. She would go home and be a one-girl circus, taking the parts of everyone she'd seen, living them before the glass. At 16, Bow said she knew she wanted to be a motion pictures actress, even if she was a square, awkward, funny-faced kid. Then, in February 1922, something happened that could have ended Clara's life before it truly began. Sarah's condition had been worsening gradually, and when she realized her daughter was set for a movie career, she told Clara she would be much better off dead. One night, Clara awoke to a butcher knife held against her throat by her mother. Clara was able to fend off the attack and locked her mother in her room. In the morning, Sarah had no recollection of the episode. She was later committed to a sanitarium by Robert Bow. Clara spoke about the incident later, describing how she and her mother had been cold and hungry for days, lying in each other's arms, crying and trying to keep warm. It grew worse and worse, she said. So that night, my mother, but I can't tell you about it. Only when I remember it, it seems to me I can't live. According to Clara's biographer, David Sten, there was another horror Clara endured. At age 16, while her mother was institutionalized, Clara was raped by her father. On January 5th, 1923, Sarah died at the age of 43 from her epilepsy. When relatives gathered for the funeral, Clara was so upset that she went crazy and tried to jump into the grave to be with her mother, shouting that the relatives were hypocrites and that they hadn't loved or cared for her mother while she was alive. Against her mother's wishes, but with her father's support, Clara had competed in Brewster Publications magazine's annual nationwide acting contest called Fame and Fortune in fall 1921. In previous years, other contest winners had found work in the movies. In the contest's final screen test, Clara was up against an already scene-experienced woman who did a beautiful piece of acting. But when Clara did the scene, a set member later stated she actually became her character and lived it. In the January 1922 issues of Motion Picture Classic, the contest jury concluded that Clara was very young, only 16, but full of confidence, determination, and ambition. She was endowed with a mentality far beyond her years. She had a genuine spark of divine fire. Her emotional range of expression provoked fine enthusiasm from every contest judge who saw the tests. She screened perfectly. Her personal appearance was almost enough to carry her to success without the aid of the brains she indubitably possessed. Clara won an evening gown and a silver trophy, and the publisher committed to help her gain a role in films, but nothing happened. Clara's father told her to haunt Brewster's office in Brooklyn until they came up with something. Eventually, to get rid of her, or maybe because they really meant to all along, Clara was introduced to director Christy Cabane, who cast her in Beyond the Rainbow, produced late 1921 in New York City, and released February 19, 1922. Clara did 5 scenes and impressed Cabane with her ability to produce tears on cue, but she was cut from the final print. I was sick to my stomach, she recalled, and thought her mother was right about the movie business. But Clara didn't give up. Encouraged by her father, she continued to visit studio agencies, asking for parts. But there was always something, she said. I was too young, or too little, or too fat. Usually I was too fat. Eventually, director Elmer Clifton needed a tomboy for his movie Down to the Sea in Ships. He saw Clara in Motion Picture Classic magazine and sent for her. In an attempt to overcome her youthful looks, Clara put her hair up and arrived in a dress she sneaked from her mother. Clifton said she was too old, but broke into laughter as the stammering Clara made him believe she was the girl in the magazine. Clifton decided to take Clara with him and offered her $35 a week. Clara held out for $50 and Clifton agreed, though he couldn't say whether she would fit the part. Down to the Sea in Ships was shot on location in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It premiered at the Olympia Theater in New Bedford on September 25, 1922, and went on general distribution on March 4, 1923. Clara was billed 10th in the film, but she shone through. One review said Miss Bow will undoubtedly gain fame as a screen comedian. Another stated that Clara Bow, who has reached the front rank of motion picture principal players, scored a tremendous hit in Down to the Sea in Ships. Yet another wrote, with her beauty, her brains, her personality, and her genuine acting ability, it should not be many moons before she enjoys stardom in the fullest sense of the word. In movie parlance, she stole the picture. By mid-December 1923, primarily due to her merits in Down to the Sea in Ships, Clara was chosen the most successful of the 1924 Wampas baby stars. She made several more films in New York, including Grit, a story about juvenile crime written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The Variety review said Clara Bow lingers in the eye long after the picture has gone. While shooting Grit, Clara was approached by Jack Bachman of independent Hollywood studio Preferred Pictures. He wanted to contract her for a 3-month trial, fair paid, and $50 a week. "It can't do any harm," he said. "Why can't I stay in New York and make movies?" Clara asked her father, but he told her not to worry. On July 21, 1923, she befriended Luella Parsons, who interviewed her for the New York Morning Telegraph. Parsons would later defend Clara when she came under tabloid scrutiny, sticking to her first opinion that Clara was as refreshingly unaffected as if she had never faced a camera, that she hadn't any secrets from the world and trusted everyone, that she was almost too good to be true. On July 22, 1923, Clara left New York, her father, and her boyfriend behind for Hollywood. She entered studio chief B.P. Schulberg's office wearing a simple high school uniform in which she had won several gold medals on the cinder track. She was tested, and a press release from early August said Clara had become a member of Preferred Pictures' permanent stock. Clara and her chaperone rented an apartment at the Hillview near Hollywood Boulevard. Preferred Pictures was run by Schulberg, who had started as a publicity manager at Famous Players Lasky, but ended up on the losing side of a power struggle and lost his job. He founded Preferred in 1919 at the age of 27. Clara's first Hollywood picture was Maytime, an adaptation of the popular operetta. Before the film was finished, Schulberg announced that Clara was given the lead in the studio's upcoming film, Poisoned Paradise. But first, she was lent to First National Pictures to co-star in the adaptation of Gertrude Atherton's 1923 bestseller Black Oxen, and to co-star with Colleen Moore in Painted People. Director Frank Lloyd was casting for the part of high society flapper Janet Oglethorpe in Black Oxen, and more than 50 women auditioned, most with previous screen experience. When Clara came into his office, Lloyd said a big smile came over his face, and he looked just tickled to death. Lloyd told the press that Bow was the personification of the ideal aristocratic flapper, mischievous, pretty, aggressive, quick-tempered, and deeply sentimental. The film was released on January 4, 1924. One review noted that the flapper, impersonated by a young actress Clara Bow, had 5 speaking titles, and every one of them was so entirely in accord with the character and the mood of the scene that it drew a laugh from what, in film circles, is termed a hard-boiled audience. The Los Angeles Times commented that Clara Bow, the prize vulgarian of the lot, was amusing and spirited, but she never belonged in the picture. Variety said that the horrid little flapper was adorably played. Clara was on her way, but the road would not be smooth. Colleen Moore, already a well-established star earning $1,200 a week while Clara got $200, took offense when Clara said she didn't like her part and wanted to play Moore's instead. Moore was married to the film's producer and blocked the director from shooting close-ups of Clara. Clara's protests were futile. "I'll get that bitch," she told her boyfriend Jacobson, who had arrived from New York. Clara had sinus problems and decided to have them attended to that very evening. With Clara's face now in bandages, the studio had no choice but to recast her part. By New Year 1924, Clara had defied her possessive chaperone and brought her father to Hollywood. Clara remembered their reunion with joy. "I didn't care a rap for her, nor B.P. Schulberg, nor my motion picture career, nor Clara Bow," she said. "I just threw myself into his arms and kissed him, and we both cried like a couple of fool kids. Oh, it was wonderful." Clara and her father moved in at 1714 North Kingsley Drive in Hollywood, together with Jacobson, who by then also worked for Preferred. When Schulberg learned of this arrangement, he fired Jacobson for potentially getting his big star into a scandal. When Clara found out, she tore up her contract and threw it in Schulberg's face and told him he couldn't run her private life. Jacobson concluded that Clara was the sweetest girl in the world, but you didn't cross her and you didn't do her wrong. In 1924, Clara appeared in 8 releases. In Poison Paradise, released on February 29th, Clara got her first lead. One review called her the clever little newcomer whose work wins fresh recommendations with every new picture in which she appears. Atypical of that time, her character was skilled in the art of self-defense, preparedness, and all the other devices with which the modern flapper is endowed, and she fearlessly beat off the villain. Lent out to Universal, Clara top-starred for the first time in the Prohibition bootleg drama comedy Wine, released on August 20th, 1924. The picture exposed the widespread liquor traffic in the upper classes, and Clara portrayed an innocent girl who developed into a wild, red-hot mama, a naughty, inebriated flapper. Carl Sandburg reviewed it saying, "If not taken as information, it is cracking good entertainment." Alma Whitaker of the Los Angeles Times observed that Clara radiated sex appeal tempered with an impish sense of humor. She henna'd her blonde hair so that it would photograph dark in the pictures. Her social decorum was of that natural, good-natured, pleasantly informal kind. She could act on or off the screen and took a joyous delight in accepting a challenge to vamp any selected male, the more unpromising specimen the better. When the hapless victim was scared into speechlessness, she gurgled with naughty delight and tried another. Clara remembered that all this time she was running wild, she guessed, in the sense of trying to have a good time. Maybe this was a good thing, she supposed, because a lot of that excitement, that joy of life, got onto the screen. In 1925, Clara appeared in 14 productions, 6 for Preferred Pictures, and 8 as an outloan. Motion Picture Classic magazine wrote in June that Clara Bow shows alarming symptoms of becoming the sensation of the year, and featured her on the cover. But Clara was never satisfied. "I'm almost never satisfied with myself or my work or anything," she said. "By the time I'm ready to be a great star, I'll have been on the screen such a long time that everybody will be tired of seeing me." Tears filled her big round eyes and threatened to fall. She worked in 2 and even 3 pictures at once, playing all sorts of parts in all sorts of pictures. It was very hard at the time, and she used to be worn out and cry herself to sleep from sheer fatigue after 18 hours a day on different sets, but later she was glad of it. Preferred Pictures loaned Clara to producers for sums ranging from $1,500 to $2,000 a week, while paying her a salary of $200 to $750 a week. The studio, like any other independent studio or theater at that time, was under attack from the Big Three, the MPAA, which had formed a trust to block out independents and enforce the monopolistic studio system. On October 21, 1925, Schulberg filed Preferred Pictures for bankruptcy, with debts at $820,774 and assets of $1,420. 3 days later, it was announced that Schulberg would join with Adolph Zukor to become associate producer of Paramount Pictures, catapulted into this position because he had Clara Bow under personal contract. Adolph Zukor, Paramount Pictures CEO, wrote in his memoirs that all the skill of directors and all the booming of press agent drums will not make a star. Only the audiences can do it. We study audience reactions with great care. But Adela Rogers St. John's had a different take. In 1950, she wrote, "If ever a star was made by public demand, it was Clara Bow." Louise Brooks stated in 1980 that Bow became a star without nobody's help. The Plastic Age was Clara's final effort for Preferred Pictures and her biggest hit up to that time. She starred as the good-bad college girl, Cynthia Day. It was shot on location at Pomona College in the summer of 1925 and released on December 15th. Photoplay was displeased, saying the college atmosphere was implausible, and Clara Bow was not their idea of a college girl. But theater owners were happy. The manager of the Liberty Theater said the picture was the biggest sensation they ever had in their theater. It was 100% at the box office. Some critics felt Clara had conquered new territory. Time magazine singled out Clara, saying only the amusing and facile acting of Clara Bow rescued the picture from the limbo of the impossible. Clara began to date her co-star Gilbert Roland, who became her first fiancé. In June 1925, Clara was credited for being the first to wear hand-painted legs in public and was reported to have many followers at the Californian beaches. Throughout the 1920s, Clara played with gender conventions and sexuality in her public image. Along with her tomboy and flapper roles, she starred in boxing films and posed for promotional photographs as a boxer. By appropriating traditionally androgynous or masculine traits, Clara presented herself as a confident modern woman. In 1926, Clara appeared in 8 releases, 5 for Paramount and 3 loanouts. On April 12, 1926, Clara signed her first contract with Paramount to retain her services as an actress for 6 months at a salary of $750 per week. Clara negotiated her Paramount contract to not have a morals clause. In Victor Fleming's comedy triangle Man Trap, Clara played Alverna, the manicurist, who cured lonely hearts. She was bad in the book, Clara commented, but darn it, of course they couldn't make her that way in the picture, so she played her as a flirt. The film was released on July 24, 1926, to rave reviews. Variety said that Clara Bow just walked away with the picture from the moment she walked into camera range. Photoplay told readers that when she was on the screen, nothing else mattered, and when she was off, the same was true. Carl Sandburg wrote that it was the smartest and swiftest work as yet seen from Miss Clara Bow. On August 16, 1926, Clara's agreement with Paramount was renewed into a 5-year deal. Her salary would start at $1,700 a week and advance yearly to $4,000 a week for the last year. Clara added that she intended to leave the motion picture business at the expiration of the contract in 1931. In 1927, Clara appeared in 6 Paramount releases, including It, Children of Divorce, Rough House Rosie, Wings, Hula, and Get Your Man. In the Cinderella-based story It, the poor shop girl Betty Lou Spence conquered the heart of her employer, Cyrus Waltham. The personal quality, It, provided the magic to make it happen. The film gave Clara her nickname, the It Girl. Reviews were outstanding. The New York Times said that Bow was vivacious and, as Betty Lou, saucy, which perhaps was one of the ingredients of It. The Film Daily wrote that Clara Bow got a real chance and carried it off with honors, and she was really the whole show. Variety said you couldn't get away from this Clara Bow girl. She certainly had that certain It, and she just ran away with the film. Carl Sandburg wrote that it was smart, funny, and real, and that it made a full-size star of Clara Bow. Dorothy Parker is often said to have referred to Clara when she wrote It Hell, She Had Those, but Parker was actually not referring to Clara or to her character in the film It, but to a different character in the novel of the same name. In 1927, Clara also starred in Wings, a war picture rewritten to accommodate her as she was Paramount's biggest star, but she wasn't happy about her part. Wings is a man's picture, she said, and I'm just the whipped cream on top of the pie. The film went on to win the first Academy Award for Best Picture. In 1928, Clara appeared in 4 Paramount releases, Red Hair, Ladies of the Mob, The Fleet's Inn, and 3 Weekends, all of which are lost apart from fragments. Adela Rogers St. John's, a noted screenwriter who had done a number of pictures with Clara, wrote about her that there seemed to be no pattern, no purpose to her life. She swung from one emotion to another but gained nothing, stored up nothing for the future. She lived entirely in the present, not even for today, but in the moment. Clara was the total nonconformist. What she wanted, she got if she could. What she desired to do, she did. She had a big heart, a remarkable brain, and the most utter contempt for the world in general. Time didn't exist for her except that she thought it would stop tomorrow. She had real courage because she lived boldly. Who are we, after all, to say she is wrong? Clara's bohemian lifestyle and dreadful manners were considered reminders of the Hollywood elite's uneasy position in high society. Clara fumed. They yell at me to be dignified, she said. But what are the dignified people like? The people who are held up as examples for me? They are snobs. Frightful snobs. I'm a curiosity in Hollywood. I'm a big freak because I'm myself. MGM executive Paul Byrne said Clara was the greatest emotional actress on the screen. She was sentimental, simple, childish, and sweet, and the hard-boiled attitude was a defense mechanism. Rehearsals sapped my pep, Clara explained in November 1929, and from the beginning of her career, she relied on immediate direction. Tell me what I have to do, and I'll do it, she said. Clara was keen on poetry and music, but according to Roger St. John's, her attention span did not allow her to appreciate novels. Clara's focal point was the scene, and her creativity made directors call in extra cameras to cover her spontaneous actions rather than holding her down. Years after Clara left Hollywood, director Victor Fleming compared her to a Stradivarius violin. "Touch her," he said, and she responded with genius. Director William Wellman was less poetic. "Movie stardom isn't acting ability, it's personality and temperament," he said. "I once directed Clara Bow in Wings. She was mad and crazy, but what a personality." With Talkies, The Wild Party, Dangerous Curves, and The Saturday Night Kid, all released in 1929, Clara kept her position as the top box office draw and queen of Hollywood. Neither the quality of Clara's voice nor her Brooklyn accent was an issue to her, her fans, or Paramount. However, Clara, like Charlie Chaplin, Louise Brooks, and most other silent film stars, did not embrace the novelty. "I hate talkies," she said. "They're stiff and limiting. You lose a lot of your cuteness because there's no chance for action, and action is the most important thing to me." A visibly nervous Clara had to do a number of retakes in The Wild Party because her eyes kept wandering up to the microphone overhead. "I can't buck progress," she said. "I have to do the best I can." In October 1929, Clara described her nerves as all shot, saying that she had reached the breaking point, and Photoplay cited reports of rows of bottles of sedatives by her bed. "Now they're having me sing," she said. "I sort of half sing, half talk, with hips and eye stuff. You know what I mean, like Maurice Chevalier. I used to sing at home, and people would say, 'Pipe down, you're terrible.' But the studio thinks my voice is great." With Paramount on parade, True to the Navy, Love Among the Millionaires, and Her Wedding Night, Clara was second at the box office, only to Joan Crawford in 1930. With No Limit and Kick In, Clara held the position as fifth at box office in 1931, but the pressures of fame, public scandals, and overwork took their toll on Clara's fragile emotional health. A damaging court trial charged her secretary, Daisy DeVoe, with financial mismanagement. According to the 1930 census, Clara lived at 512 Bedford Drive together with her secretary and hairdresser, Daisy DeVoe, in a house valued at $25,000. Clara stated she was 23 years old, contradicting the censuses of 1910 and 1920. As Clara slipped closer to a major breakdown, her manager, B.P. Schulberg, began referring to her as Crisis a Day Clara. In April, Clara was taken to a sanatorium and, at her request, Paramount released her from her final undertaking, City Streets. At 25, her career was essentially over. B.P. Schulberg tried to replace Clara with his girlfriend Sylvia Sidney, but Paramount went into receivership, lost its position as the biggest studio to MGM, and fired Schulberg. David Selznick explained that when Bow was at her height in pictures, they could make a story with her in it and gross $1.5 million, where another actress would gross $500,000 in the same picture and with the same cast. Clara left Hollywood for Rex Bell's ranch in Nevada, her desert paradise, in June, and married him in then small-town Las Vegas in December. In an interview on December 17th, Clara detailed her way back to health, sleep, exercise, and food. The day after, she returned to Hollywood for the sole purpose of making enough money to be able to stay out of it. Soon, every studio in Hollywood, except Paramount and even overseas, wanted her services. Mary Pickford stated that Clara was a very great actress and wanted her to play her sister in Secrets. Howard Hughes offered her a 3-picture deal, and MGM wanted her to star in Red-Headed Woman. Clara agreed to the script, but eventually rejected the offer since Irving Thalberg required her to sign a long-term contract. On April 28, 1932, Clara signed a 2-picture deal with Fox Film Corporation for Call Her Savage and Hoop La. Both were successful. Variety favored Hoop La. The October 1934 Family Circle Film Guide rated the film as pretty good entertainment and stated this was the most acceptable bit of talkie acting Miss Bow had done. However, they noted, Miss Bow was presented in her dancing duds as often as possible, and her dancing duds wouldn't weigh 2 pounds soaking wet. Clara commented on her revealing costume in Hoop La. "Rex accused me of enjoying showing myself off," she said. "Then I got a little sore. He knew darn well I was doing it because we could use a little money these days. Who can't?" Clara reflected on her career. "My life in Hollywood contained plenty of uproar," she said. "I'm sorry for a lot of it, but not awfully sorry. I never did anything to hurt anyone else. I made a place for myself on the screen, and you can't do that by being Mrs. Alcott's idea of a little woman." Clara and Rex Bell had 2 sons, Tony Bell Dam, born 1934, who changed his name to Rex Anthony Bell Jr. and died in 2011, and George Beldam Jr., born 1938, who died in 2024. Clara retired from acting in 1933. In September 1937, Clara and Bell opened the It Cafe in the Hollywood Plaza Hotel near Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. They sold the cafe in 1943. Her last public performance, albeit fleeting, came in 1947 on the radio show Truth or Consequences. Clara was the mystery voice in the show's Miss Hush contest. "All the time the flapper is laughing and dancing," Clara once said. "There's a feeling of tragedy underneath. She's unhappy and disillusioned, and that's what people sense." Clara eventually began showing symptoms of psychiatric illness. She became socially withdrawn and, although she refused to socialize with her husband, she also refused to let him leave the house alone. In 1944, while Bell was running for the U.S. House of Representatives, Clara attempted suicide. A note was found in which Clara stated she preferred death to a public life. In 1949, she checked into the Institute of Living to be treated for her chronic insomnia and diffuse abdominal pains. Shock treatment was tried and numerous psychological tests performed. Clara's IQ was measured as bright normal, while others claimed she was unable to reason, had poor judgment, and displayed inappropriate or even bizarre behavior. Her pains were considered delusional, and she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. However, she experienced neither auditory nor visual hallucinations. Analysts tied the onset of the illness, as well as her insomnia, to the butcher knife episode back in 1922, but Clara rejected psychological explanations and left the institute. She did not return to her family. After leaving the institution, Clara lived alone in a bungalow, which she rarely left, until her death. Clara spent her last years in Culver City under the constant care of a nurse, Estala Smith, living off an estate worth about $500,000 at the time of her death. In 1965, at age 60, she died of a heart attack, which her autopsy attributed to atherosclerosis. She was interred in the Freedom Mausoleum, Sanctuary of Heritage at Forest Lawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Glendale, California. Her pallbearers were Harry Richmond, Richard Arlen, Jack Oakey, Maxie Rosenblum, Jack Dempsey, and Buddy Rogers. Film historian Leonard Maltin said in 1999 that you think of Greta Garbo, Lillian Gish, all these great names, great actresses, but Clara Bow was more popular in terms of box office dollars, in terms of consistently bringing audiences into the theaters. She was right on top. In 1999, the American Film Institute excluded Clara from its finalized 100 Years, 100 Stars list, although she was on the list of nominees. Film historian Kevin Brownlow did not mention Clara in his 1968 book on silent films, The Parades Gone By. Louise Brooks, who received an entire chapter in the book, wrote to Brownlow saying, you brush off Clara Bow for some old nothing like Brooks. Clara made 3 pictures that will never be surpassed: Dancing Mothers, Mantrap, and It. In a conversation with filmmaker Thomas Hamilton, Brownlow explained that he had planned to include a chapter on Clara, but was unable to secure an interview with the reclusive star before her death. And since all chapters were based on first-hand accounts, it would have been inconsistent to include a chapter based on second-hand anecdotes. Brownlow made up for this omission by including an entire segment about Clara in his television documentary Hollywood, a celebration of the American silent film, for which he interviewed Brooks. Clara Bow was awarded a Motion Picture Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960. Her star is located at 1500 Vine Street. In 1994, she was honored with an image on a United States postage stamp designed by caricaturist Al Hirschfeld. Max Fleischer's cartoon character Betty Boop was modeled after Clara's appearance and after the voice of entertainer Helen Kane. Clara's mass of tangled red hair was one of her most famous features. When fans of the new star found out she put henna in her hair, sales of the dye tripled. Clara Bow was a woman who clawed her way out of unimaginable poverty and trauma to become one of the most beloved stars in the world. She was the embodiment of freedom and joy on screen, but that joy came at a terrible cost. The little girl who had to care for her mentally ill mother, who survived an attempted murder by that same mother, who was violated by her own father, never truly escaped those horrors. They followed her into her success and ultimately destroyed her. Hollywood chewed her up and spit her out, as it has done to so many women before and since. But for a brief shining moment in the 1920s, Clara Bow was it. She was everything everyone wanted to be, wild and free and utterly alive. And even though the world forgot her for decades, her legacy lives on. Every time someone talks about an it girl, they're talking about Clara Bow, whether they know it or not. She invented that term, that idea, that energy. She gave everything she had to the screen, and the screen gave her fame and fortune, but it couldn't give her peace. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.